what is the relationship between Christians and body modifications? Talking about tattoos, piercings, permanent birth control, surgeries, implants, what else? You could think about prosthetics and even DNA modification. That is what we're talking about today on the Things You Don't Hear in Church podcast. My name is Ethan.
And my name is Derry, and everybody, we exist all over the internet. If you want to go check us out, we're all over the place. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. We've got extra content. If you want to see it, please like, subscribe. All that kind of stuff helps keep the show going. We love doing this. We would do it if no one was watching, but it's cool that people are watching. But yeah, thanks for your support, and smash that like button. And today, like Ethan said, we're talking about different means of body modification. We've done individual episodes talking about some of these things before, but this kind of all stemmed from a Catholic video I watched on Instagram where they were talking about how Christians can't get vasectomies. And I had never heard that before. I don't know how I had never heard that before, but I had just never heard that. And I messaged Ethan and I was like, did you know, like, this topic? And he was like, yeah, like Catholics don't believe you can get vasectomies. And I was like, I should have put that together because I know that they don't believe in birth control, but I just never heard them. Yeah, I just never heard of that before. I'm a big dummy. That's all I'm trying to say. I'm exposing myself as a big dummy here. But we wanted to do a full episode on all the different types of body modification that a Christian can go through, possibly. What is okay versus what is possible, right? Because all of this stuff, like, is possible, is accepted in our world today. But what of it, if any, can Christians actually partake in? From the most like benign that we usually talk about, like piercings, like kids get their parents get their kids' ears pierced, right? From ear piercing all the way to like DNA modification, more of like a futuristic thing that we've done, but isn't like fully accepted. So we wanted to go through the full gambit of all of these things today. What the Bible says about them, what the culture says about them, what we think as just two dudes, and then maybe give you some interesting things to talk about yourself as well. So we could probably start at the beginning, just from the most basic, most intro one of ear piercings or just piercings on the body in general. All of this, I guess, before we even get into piercings, kind of stems from two categories of body modification, right? In my opinion, and Ethan, you can tell me if there's these eyes, they're balloons. Anyways, Ethan, you can tell me if you think there's different categories for this as well. But I feel like there's two categories of body modification. There's cosmetic ones, so ones that you just want to do because you want to look a different way for fun, right? Those would be like the piercings, the surgeries, like lip fillers, implants on the more serious end of things, right? Most of these things are mostly reversible. Like you could take your earrings out, you could take your implants out, but like it's going to leave some kind of mark here or there, right? And then there's functional changing, like body modifications, right? These are going to be things like vasectomies or gender transition surgeries, more serious stuff like that. So we want to talk about the full gambit of those things today, and we'll start with piercings. So Ethan, what do you think about piercings? Should Christians be allowed to get piercings? What do you think?
Yeah, piercings are fine. Derry has two right there. He's like, is it fine? Is it fine? Guys shouldn't because it's, I was going to say something that's not politically correct. But no, I'm just kidding. Guys can get piercings. Girls can get piercings. If you live under your parents' house and you're not an adult, maybe you should have their permission first just to honor your parents. Why? Because there's no moral, ethical harm in it, and the Bible doesn't say you can't. Now, the Bible does talk about piercings, but I think mainly it's about like if someone had a piercing, it'd be like they were a voluntary slave of someone because they're like, oh yeah, this master, I worked for him for a couple of years. He was great. I want to work for him for as long as I live. So I'm going to become part of his family. And so it pierce either through the nose or the ear. I forget which one. And that'd be a marker of being a bond slave for someone. So for a Christian today, you could say like, I'm a bond slave to Christ. So I got this piercing as a representation of that. That'd be super dope. A little hardcore punk rock representation of your faith. That'd be super cool. Although it would only mean that to you because no one in society thinks about that anymore. But but yeah, it's like it's not a moral thing.
It'd be so funny to just walk up to some white girl on the street and go, "Oh, who are you a slave of?" And just like point to their like nose ring.
Yeah, you get punched so fast.
What do you mean?
Yeah, and then same thing with tattoos, right? Tattoos are also in the Bible, but it says don't get tattoos to honor the dead like the pagans do, right? And that was a very religious thing in that culture. And so there's not much that you can go off of in the Bible to say, oh yeah, today Christians in the New Covenant shouldn't have piercings or tattoos. Well, Derry, what do you think? You obviously agree. You have some, or you are living in sin.
Yes, or I'm repentant and I'm not going to get any more.
But then if
That's
you were
also an
repentant, you'd
option.
remove the earrings. You can't get the
Oh,
tattoos
that's true.
removed. So,
No, it's true. I could get the tattoos removed.
do you think
Tattoos are semi-permanent.
if you cut off the skin where the tattoo is, the
Yes,
skin will
it'd
grow
be
back
gone.
without the tattoo, of course.
Well, it'd be scarred because it's a pretty deep level of skin.
So you think you'd still have a remnant of the picture of the tattoo?
No, but you would have a big scar.
Yeah. I mean, depending on how big the tattoo is.
Sure, yeah.
You
It
could
wouldn't
flay
heal.
yourself.
It wouldn't go back to normal. It would be way better to just flay yourself. It would be way better to just get it removed. Like it's so much easier. And the technology has gotten way better to get tattoos removed now.
Gotcha. I don't have either, so I wouldn't know.
The nose ring one that you brought up is actually really interesting. In Ezekiel 16:20, it says that God adorned Israel with a nose ring. And so kind of an interesting parallel there.
Hardcore.
So it seems like there's even biblical precedent for getting some piercings. Like it's fine to semi hurt or change your body in a cosmetic way. That's okay. Like God even does it to Israel, right? As like a marker or signifier. You're not changing any kind of natural function of the body. You're just kind of adding something that culturally is beautiful or cool to it. And so it doesn't seem like there's a problem with that in Scripture, at least when it comes to piercings. It means something symbolically. I'm sure that there was like a cultural significance to that just kind of gets co-opted, which is kind of cool as well. But like I'd be interested to see if there's any significance to piercings in other cultures around that time as well. I've never really looked into that, but might be an interesting study. If you're out there and want to do that kind of study, let us know what you find. But it seems like it's even a positive thing in the Bible to have piercings in some ways, and so I don't think that it would be a problem. Even though technically you're like piercing your body, like you're making a hole in your body pretty permanently, unless your body like heals really, really well. Once it's healed, you're going to have like some remnant of a scar there forever that isn't self-inflicted for purely like cultural or cosmetic reasons. So I think some people could argue a couple different points against why you shouldn't get piercings or tattoos. They would say maybe it's for vanity. And then some people would go beyond that and say, well, the culture is going to think that you're associated with a certain kind of person, so you shouldn't do it. That's another argument a lot of people say. And then, like Ethan said, some people argue from is it Leviticus or Deuteronomy, where it talks about not having tattoos.
I think
in service of
Deuteronomy.
the dead. Yeah. I think all of those arguments fall apart pretty fast. One, our culture is super accepting of tattoos now. It's not like you're in different places in Asia where gangsters are the only people who get tattoos and it's still kind of frowned upon. Only really places like Japan and stuff still feel that way, and sometimes Korea. But even in those places, it's still becoming a lot more culturally acceptable, and it's not just like gangsters that have those things anymore. So I think the whole world is coming to accept it a little more. I would say if someone was like, wow, am I at some point going to be in Asia and want to like be a good witness? Maybe you can consider not getting tattoos at that point, but you could also still just cover them up and you'd be pretty safe. You're probably going to wear more clothes there anyway. So you could consider those things, but you have freedom in Christ. And so those are things you can consider and something you shouldn't go against your conscience on. Like if you feel like it's a sin, you shouldn't do it for some reason, but it's not inherently a sin in the Bible necessarily. We're not held to that law in Deuteronomy anymore, and I'm also not getting tattoos for the dead. So in both aspects of what that passage could be talking about, I'm not committing those sins. I'd be interested to know like why some Orthodox people think tattoos are bad or like still sinful. I've heard them say that, but I actually don't. I've never heard their arguments. Have you ever heard arguments for that, Ethan?
No. I also think nowadays, if you got like a tattoo in remembrance of a family member that passed, do you think that's the same as the Deuteronomy thing? And would that be wrong? Or can people get mementos to their fallen friends or, like Like soldiers will get stuff in memory of their friends who passed away in war, and like parents and stuff like that, and grandparents. Are those tattoos wrong?
Find the Deuteronomy verse for me really fast. Let's read the context of it, just so like we cannot misspeak on this, because I thought it was in service to other gods as well, and not just like the dead. But I could be wrong. I haven't read the verse in a really long time.
It's Leviticus. Sure. Sorry, it's not even Leviticus. It's Leviticus 19:28.
Okay.
You shall not make any cut in your body for the dead, or tattoo any mark upon yourselves. But apparently Deuteronomy 14:15 might have some too. Oh my gosh, what is this website? Has all these different. There's a whole presentation. It's like a slideshow. That's not organized enough. Bible Gateway. Good old Bible Gateway. Leviticus, yeah. You shall not make any cuts on your body for the dead, or tattoo yourself. I am the Lord. So that doesn't even, like, the tattoo yourself doesn't even seem to be specifically about just the dead. Yahweh just seems to be like, don't tattoo yourself. Now, maybe there's connection with the dead, like, don't cut yourself for the dead and don't get tattoos. And, like, maybe because it says it right after, there could be connection. I'm not sure what the cultural significance was there. Deuteronomy 14:1, you are the sons of the Lord your God. You shall not cut yourselves or make any baldness on your forehead for the dead. So this is not for the dead. I'm not making myself bald for the dead. This is because the Lord has decided I won't have hair. Yeah.
I was reading about why Orthodox don't allow people to have tattoos, and it's because of the iconography of their bodies being made in the image of God, and so they don't want to taint the image of God given to them in Genesis 1:28, I think, is the passage, or 2:28, can't remember. So it's like that iconography that is important to them, which is cool. I wouldn't say that being made in the image of God has to do with like us actually, like our bodies being made in the image of God, like God looks like us, but they do, so that makes sense, I guess.
Yeah,
for them.
But yeah, as far as like this new covenant thing, there doesn't seem like there's anything prohibiting it, and it's not like a moral. If you got it out of rebellion, like I'm mad at my dad, he doesn't want me to have a tattoo, I'm gonna get it. That's sin, because your attitude's rebellion. But if you're just like, I'm an adult, I'm out of my parents' house, that's really cool and meaningful to me, I want to get it. That's fine. A lot of this has to do, and like a lot of the topics we're going to cover have to do with like vanity and the heart posture of these things. Like you could say like, oh, it's vanity to get tattoos and piercings, but so therefore you shouldn't get it. But at the same time, it's vanity to have like, it could be vanity to be like all into the high fashion, have the dopest streetwear, and like got to get the next drop of shoes and spend all your money on that. And like, that's just as sinful as, something else that is called vanity. And so vanity doesn't have like a specific thing you can point to and look at, but it's about the heart posture of the other person. And so that's really what it comes down to, is how many of these things, these body modifications, are caused from the root of vanity. And from here, maybe we can transition even into like the plastic surgery type cosmetic stuff. If we've finished.
I had one more note.
Yeah, you got one more note then?
One more note. I remember the Leviticus and Deuteronomy passages being about pagan worship. I couldn't remember where exactly I knew that from, but I looked at some notes, and the shaving and the tattoos and the cutting were all things that Mesopotamian priests did in like allegiance, or to show, not iconography, but to show like
allegiance,
ritualistic. Yeah, allegiance, but also like in ritualistic kind of ways to show that they were priests, or to show they had associations with the dead and stuff like that. And so that's what the priests did, like for their gods in sacrifice or in rituals. And so Israel was called, that's what Leviticus is about, right? To be holy, to be set apart before God. And so in Leviticus, God is being like, hey, don't worship other gods, and don't like worship like these other nations worship me. You have to be set apart and not do it like they do. And so I think those prohibitions in tattoos and cutting yourself and in shaving your head, or shaving, it just says shaving your body in different ways too. You shouldn't do that, because that's what other cultures did to worship their gods. And so one, like you said, that was for that culture at that time, and we don't have pagan worship that happens like that now that's super popular that people would be able to associate those cultural signs with. So I don't think it really applies to us anymore.
Yeah, I wonder if like Hawaiian tribal tattoos have any connection to their pagan gods, because that would be like a time where it would apply in real time. Same with like in Southeast Asia, there's probably some pagan tattoo ritual that exists out there, or like the Amazons or something. So anywhere you see like tattoos equal worship to other gods, that's where it's wrong. But in a culture where tattoos just equal expression of self-interest, that seems fine.
Yeah.
Now someone could respond and say, well, they shouldn't have self-interest. They should have interest in what God has interest in. And it's like, you don't got to read into it that deep. Like someone just thinks Pikachu's cool and they want him on their thigh. That's fine.
Yeah. That or even like conviction, but
dude, my friend
unless someone thinks Pikachu is their god, like that could be a problem.
Yeah, my friend got a really cool tattoo of like, he hates wearing wedding rings, so he got a tattoo of like just a band, but it's broken by his wife's first name's initial. And so it's like right there on his finger, and I was like, "That's so cool." I didn't know he got it because he doesn't have any other tattoos, and I just saw him the other day, and I was like, "Whoa, that's so cool."
Cool.
Okay, so
yeah, we can go to plastic surgery now.
Yeah, so like I said, this is all revolving around like what is vanity, because Christians should not be given to vanity. I have 2 Bible verses to explain this, but I think that's a pretty agreed upon perspective to have. But Proverbs 31:30 says, "Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised." And 1 Peter 3:3-5, and I will break down the context after, but it says, "Do not let your adorning be external, the braiding of hair, the putting on of gold jewelry, or the clothing you wear, but let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. For this is how the holy women who hoped in God used to adorn themselves, by submitting to their own husbands." So specifically, 1 Peter's talking to wives, and probably there's some cultural thing of like, oh, maybe married women were having the highest fashion and doing all this stuff and looking like, I don't know, putting on all their jewelry and makeup and trying to make a big show of themselves. And Peter is saying like, hey, if you're married, don't worry about all that. Don't focus on that, but rather focus on having a pure and holy lifestyle. But of course, any husband in the world will want their wife to, when they go on a date, dress up and put on nice jewelry and wear nice makeup and look like that's like going to be a thing people want. So of course this is specifically talking about wives, and of course Proverbs is specifically talking about with women, like charm is deceitful but beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. But with both of these, they're getting at the idea that vanity is not something to be sought after, is not something to be valued. What's rather to be valued is a godly lifestyle, and that can be applied to everyone, right? Guys can commit vanity. And so we need to make sure that we are not giving in to vanity. Vanity is not good. Pretty clear in the Bible, I believe. So with cosmetics, with plastic surgery, all that stuff, tattoos, fashion, piercings, if it comes from vanity, you want to stay away from it. But like we mentioned earlier, if it's like medically necessary and like maybe you're in a car accident and you need some reconstructive surgery, and there's something where like you need plastic surgery to make yourself look how you did before, I think that's totally fine. Derry, I'm curious about what you think on the subject, and then how I'll pass it over to you is, for instance, if someone just doesn't like their nose and they're like, I feel ugly, I want to change my nose. Do you think as a Christian they're allowed to get the plastic surgery to fix their nose the way they want it, or should they just leave their nose as is and find some way to accept them as who they are?
Yeah, good question. Reiterating what you said before, obviously plastic surgery is fine, and I don't think debated to be not fine in certain instances, like to fix, like if you're in a crash and you need to get a skin graft to fix something that went wrong, right? We allow that culturally, and I think there's no, like the Bible doesn't speak on it, so Christians, like theologically, don't have a problem with it, right? To make yourself look as close to you were before is totally fine. Like no matter what part of your body you're trying to fix or reconstruct, there was a problem that happened, and so medically you're just trying to fix something that went wrong. With the just changing things from like how they are to being better, That's a little bit different because that's just the way that you were born, most likely, unless it's a specific circumstance where it wasn't just how you were born. But this is where like most of the root problem morally kind of comes from, is not being satisfied with the way you were born. And so one side of the coin would say, well, look, you're God's creation. You are his temple, the temple of the Holy Spirit. God said that like how you're created is fearfully and wonderfully. That's how you were made, right? Like Proverbs 139 says. And so
Psalms?
How could you be dissatisfied? Yeah, Psalms. Did I say Proverbs?
Yeah, I didn't know there were 100
Psalms.
more chapters of
There's
Proverbs.
not that many Proverbs. So you're saying you're dissatisfied with the way God made you. And I think that there's rebuttals to that as well. I don't think that because you're made fearfully and wonderfully means that you're made perfectly, right? Because that would mean that God making you with cancer or something would be being made perfectly and wonderfully. Obviously, cancer is a bad thing, and dying like as a kid is a bad thing. So because of sin, we live in a fallen world, and our bodies are perishable and imperfect, right? And there obviously can be made imperishable by God, but everything in this world is imperfect and passing away. And that doesn't mean that there isn't still beauty in God's creation, right? To be alive is still a blessing, is still a gift. And to be made in God's image, it still means that we're fearfully and wonderfully made by our Creator who loves us and cares for us. So there's still such innate value in the human body and how we're made, but it doesn't mean that we're made perfectly. So there is some kind of gray area, in my opinion, between how we're made well and how we're made imperfect. And that's why, because the Bible doesn't speak clearly about physical augmentations, why I think there is this gray area for Christians to go on their conviction here. So that's my end answer. We're going to talk about specifics because I think there are really interesting specifics. But my main answer is it's a gray area. We're not made perfect, but we are made wonderfully. And so we have to be respectful of how God made us. But it doesn't mean that we're made perfect. So there might be some gray area for us to be able to change some of the things. For example, Ethan, let's say there's a guy, like I had a friend growing up, and he had, do you know what gyno is?
No. Like the doctor?
He had just like natural occurring like gyno. No, a gyno is where you have like puffy nipples, basically.
Okay.
So he had that, and for a kid, like that's embarrassing, right? Like just, most guys don't have that. And so he got surgery to fix it. And you can get gyno as like a bodybuilder because you take like too much steroids and stuff. That's like one way some people tell sometimes, but there's corrective surgery for it. And so that wasn't something that like went wrong in his body necessarily. It was how he was made, but culturally something went wrong, right? Like that's not super normal culturally. And so we're like, oh, he's going to get made fun of or whatever, or even just be conscious about it. And so he changed it for that reason. So that's the way that he was made, and that he changed to be more comfortable with himself because of cultural norms, right? Why is that different than someone being born in some other culturally different way and being like, I want to change? Like if let's say you're born and your nose, just for a crazy example, my nose is like a foot long. I have a foot-long nose. Like, it's very abnormal.
A Pinocchio looking fool out
I
here.
am Pinocchio. Yeah, literally. I'm getting made fun of. Like, that's how I'm naturally made.
Beat him up with your stick nose.
No, yeah. Would it be sinful for me to change how I look to fit in culturally? I don't think so. Now, you could argue there's a difference between being absurdly different culturally, like having a nose that's a foot long, and just having like a semi-larger nose than on average and wanting it to be like slimmer or something, right? You could argue that there's a difference there. I don't fully think that there is, because still you're arguing from an argument of cultural pressure, just a more extreme cultural pressure than a more limited one. Like you and maybe a couple other people might not like a bigger nose, but some people might like it, right? Versus having a really big nose, like most people are going to look at you if you have a foot-long nose and you're walking around. It's just a different variation of cultural pressure, and maybe even internal pressure that you're feeling from the culture, from comparing yourself to other people.
Yeah, I think what's different is, cosmetic plastic surgery is fine when it's if you have some type of quote unquote defect that makes you different than the average person, right? So having gyno, like it's not normal for men to have puffy nipples. So if you're just taking yourself from like an extreme abnormality and going to a normality, like a foot long nose to a normal nose, that's fine. No problem there. You want to look like what a normal human looks like. I'm not trying to be rude, but like, that, there are normalities in society and you want to look like that. That's fine. What's not okay in my mind, and I don't think Christians should do this, is you just don't like your nose, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's like you're like, oh, it's not. It's like a little bit more like up than I want, so I'm gonna get some plastic surgery to bring it down. It's like that is not okay because that's not an abnormality. You just might not like the way you look, but that you not liking the way you look is the answer is not, and the solution is not. Okay, let me get plastic surgery to fix it and become how I want to look. The solution is to get to a point where you can see yourself as God sees you and you can love yourself the way God loves you and you don't have insecurities anymore, right? Like you trying to do the external work to not be insecure is not going to change your internal brokenness of insecurity. And so you need you need God to come in and restore that so you can find that security. And then I'm sure I would be surprised if anyone after having that confidence restored still feels like they still want to change. You know what I mean?
What if somebody was not self-conscious, they don't have a vanity problem, would it still be sinful in your mind for them to change their nose or their ears or get lip filler or something like that?
I would just ask for what purpose. Like they might be like, oh, I just look really good. I like how I look. I want to look that much better. I'm not insecure. I just want to look that much better. Like, guy with really nice, there's that one guy there's like a viral video I saw where this guy like got all his teeth like changed. And like, it's like where they shave it down and put I forget what they're called.
Yeah. Veneers
on. And he's like 25 and he's a really good looking guy. And I'm like, dude, like you're ripped. You got a good jawline. You got all your hair. You got a nice fade. Why did you do that? And it's like looks unnatural. And it's like, okay, that seems to be like not, and maybe vanity is rooted in insecurity, you could say, but it seems more of like, oh, you have vanity where you are just like in competition with something, trying to get that much more ahead as far as your like image goes, maybe. And I would just wonder why. Like, what do you need the lip filler for? What do you need the nose job for? What do you need all this for? If you're comfortable in your own skin, you don't feel like you want that stuff. At least everyone I know who's comfortable in their skin has never wanted those things.
I would say that falls in a gray area still, though, of like someone has to deal with their own internal insecurities, and has to deal with their own motivations for those things. But I think that you could have a neutral motivation for wanting to have something done cosmetically to yourself, and that would be okay. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
like,
some people,
what's the difference, do you think, between somebody getting plastic surgery to change their nose a little bit or get rid of a wrinkle versus getting like earrings or something?
Earrings don't change your actual God-given body as far as they look.
Like,
but putting a little hole, it's not the same. Like putting a little hole in your ear is not the same as changing the entire shape of your nose.
I think it is. Like, I think it's the same because let's say I just got some wrinkles removed. All I'm doing is like pulling some skin a little bit this way. Like that is just as different as me putting a hole in my body. You know what I mean?
I don't think it's the same because the hole in the body doesn't change your appearance. Like my ear still looks like it just has a little dot in the ear, like visually. Whereas you can tell where it's like, oh, you're like continually trying to iron out these wrinkles. You're just going to continue to look weirder and weirder as you keep doing it over and over and over. And it's like you're trying to delay. Usually and I could think this is a pretty fair assumption. You're trying to delay the aging and you're trying to stay looking young because you have some idea that, oh, it's more beautiful to be young and I want to be beautiful. So that's why I want it. Where it's like, well, just age naturally and like, like enjoy the beauty of your age now. And if you're like, oh, but I don't like these wrinkles, then it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a point where it's like maybe one or two might be okay, but at some point it's excessive and it's too much. Like little adjustments might be okay, but completely changing things over a long time or getting your whole nose done is, I think, very different than just earrings.
Yeah, I think there's obviously excess change that is clearly has bad motivations, and you could call someone out on that. But just the base moral underlying motivations for, or I guess maybe just moral observations between getting a hole in your body because it looks cool culturally and getting like lip filler so that your lips look like fuller and that's cooler culturally. I don't see a difference between those two things. Like they're both body modifications. They're both changing your body for cultural reasons because people like them. And I don't see how those two things are different.
Is lip filler reversible?
I think all plastic surgeries are somewhat reversible.
Because I know like for earrings, you can just take out your earrings if you don't want them, and just they can close up over time. But like getting lip filler,
you'll forever have the scar there, though.
True, but like lip filler it seems so much more different because, like, an earring's not changing the shape of your ear. You're just hanging something on your ear.
It could. I mean, it depends on the size of earring you get.
I mean, who do you know that's ever permanently changed the shape of their ear with an earring?
Anybody with gauges?
That's true. Maybe people should.
Of any size.
Yeah, just don't get gauges up purely as a fashion advice. Just don't get them. You know, when you're like 35, gauges. You're going to look real bad.
In your opinion?
It's like you have gauges, you have to wear them. You have to have them in for life.
I don't think so. I like.
Or else you just got like
little
noodles hanging down. You got like.
I know.
Like Chef Boyardee looking fool.
Yeah. True.
Yeah.
I think it looks cool, but it is a cultural difference. But the thing is that both of them, in my opinion, are just culturally charged things you do to look cool or look sexy or whatever you want to call it, right? Like. You're doing something to be seen in a certain way by a culture, whether it's wearing earrings for some reason or getting your eyebrows done or, sorry, not getting your eyebrows done. I guess if you got like an eyebrow tattoo.
You're not allowed to get an eyebrow wax.
No matter what, there's some sort of permanent part of it, but you could get lip filler taken out. Like you can get most plastic surgeries reversed. There's some sort of like leftover residue. That's not a residue. I don't know what residual ramifications. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but just like with ear piercings, like there's going to be that hole there forever. Like you're going to see it forever.
I guess I would wonder like
there.
And obviously people might have their opinions. Like if someone said, "Oh, should I get lip filler?" I'm like, "Why do you want it?" Like, well, I'm getting older. I'd like my lips to look a little bit more youthful. I think at 38, 45, that's fine. This is just only my opinion. This is not any spiritual advice. And then, like, just personally, like, if you're 60 and older, even 55 and older, maybe even 52 and older, you can't get lip filler. You just listen. Listen, you haven't. Yeah, just age. We all respect and love old people. Just age.
Yeah. I think the difference in what we're both talking about right now is that I'm trying to point out like what is sinful and what's not.
And I'm giving fashion advice.
And so I'm and so I'm trying to just say like, hey, like. There's this gray area. Both like body modifications for cosmetic reasons are morally okay, but what's not morally okay could be your motivations, which is what you're trying to point out.
Yeah.
So I think my like stance is all of these things are not inherently morally wrong. Like it's not inherently sinful to get lip injections or to get piercings or something, but they can be morally wrong depending on why you're getting them.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so we have yet to get into the most controversials. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Do you think there's a difference between cutting your hair and your nails and like getting ear piercings or some other kind of cosmetic surgery?
Cutting your hair and your nails and like shaping your beard is in the same category of working out where like you're just adjusting what God gave you naturally. But like adding stuff like tattoos, piercings, those are all like accessorizing, like, so I think they're categorically different. You know, it's nice to keep your nails in our culture, keep your nails kempt, your hair nice and not disheveled and stuff like that. So one is just taking care of what you already have and one is adding. So I don't know if they can be compared to each other.
I just feel like one is even more severe, like cutting off a part of your body, like you're cutting off your hair or your nails. Like those are both parts of your body. Now you could argue like, No, for sure it'll grow back, but it's still part of your body. So just because it
But
grows,
it's not like
doesn't mean that
mutilation.
It's not.
It's not mutilation like changing your nose. Your nose won't grow back to how it was.
That's true. That is true. Okay, just thought I'd ask that question. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So where were you going? I cut you off.
I was gonna say we're 40 minutes in, and we have yet to get to the most controversial topics.
35 minutes. We're fine.
All right. So, do we want to move on to? At this point, if you're a parent listening with children, just so you know, we're getting into more adult topics. So, I don't know if any adults with children listen to us or have their children listen to us. It'd be crazy if there's like 5-year-olds listen to us. But
hey, good for them.
They're gonna be super smart.
Or super dumb. Who knows?
If they listen to you,
dang, got them.
Let's get it. Okay, so vasectomies, and is it females tie their tubes? Is that it?
Yep.
Okay.
Can't remember the official term. Tying the tubes.
Yeah.
Technically, it's tying tubes for guys too. I don't know why we call it something else.
I don't know.
Severing the tubes.
I don't know. Hey, Laura, can you make coffee? What?
Tubular severance is what I'm officially referring to it from now on as.
Severance.
Tubular severance.
You only remember that happened when you are consummating your marriage.
Yes. Niche reference no one listening to the show will get.
Oh, guys, go watch Severance.
Very funny.
Go watch Severance.
Apple TV, go watch it. 3 months free. Apple TV.
Yeah.
Premium.
Okay, so if you guys aren't aware,
anyways,
both of these things, one is for guys, one for girls, they are more called like permanent conception control, birth control.
Changes.
What?
Yeah. Functional changes.
Yeah, both of them stop, like for vasectomies, it stops the male from producing or like having sperm sent out of their body to fertilize an egg, and one would cut off the ability for the sperm to get to the uterus where the egg happens. Right?
I'm not caught up on female birth control. I knew at one point, but I don't know anymore. I know there's ones that sterilize, and there's ones that block.
Both take surgery. Both are probably irreversible. If they try to be reversible, they're but it's like pretty risky to try to reverse it. And expensive and more permanent. So usually people around their 40s when they're like, when it's like, oh, we're done having kids. Maybe we have 4 or 5 kids. We don't want any more. We're gonna get some surgeries to make sure we don't have to go through that. This is the conversation that started the workings of this whole podcast. So, Derry, do you want to start on this, or how do you want to go about this?
Yes. So when it comes to the function being changed, that's the biggest part of this, I think, morally. Like the other things we were talking about, when it comes to being made in the image of God, that was like the main verse that was maybe a hindrance to a lot of people for changing the way that they appear. But I think because we talked about being made not perfectly, but being made wonderfully, and that we live in a fallen world, that there could be some gray area in there for changing cosmetic appearances of yourself. But that would be kind of up to your own like convictions, right? Of what's sinful and not sinful. When it comes to functional changes, it's going to be a little different, though. A little bit different. And it's because you're changing something that is natural to a human being, how God intended us to be made. God didn't intend everybody to be made with like a foot-long nose, right? So it could be fine to change a foot-long nose, like we talked about in an insane example. But God intended naturally for humans to be able to reproduce. This is just the example that we're giving right now. We'll go into other ones later, but right now we're talking about reproduction, and that's what God intended most people to be able to do. Now, not everybody can do that because we live in a fallen world, right? Some people are made just like from birth without that ability for some reason or another on one side or the other, right? Male or female. And there could be a lot of things wrong, but that is the natural function of a human being, is to be able to reproduce. And so to change that natural function, I think you need some kind of reason for. And to be completely like transparent, I don't fully have a fleshed out view on this. I've thought a lot about it, but And I have some solidified views, but not 100% solidified. Maybe like 85% sure of what I think. So it'll be fun to talk to Ethan about this and see what we think. But I think it all boils down mostly to Genesis 1:28, where God says, "Be fruitful and multiply," because that's like it's a command. But if you look at the Hebrew, it's also a gift. Like it's a good gift God gives to people, to where it is something He says you should do, but as a good thing. So it's not like a you have to do this kind of a command. It's like a you get to do this kind of a command. If you look at the intent of the passage, at least that's what I was told by a professor. So hopefully that is correct. But just being transparent. So that your interpretation of that passage, I think, is going to have a lot to do with the outcome of what you think is okay or not okay here. Okay, so that's what even a lot of Catholics will argue for. I think two things you have to decide about this passage of what you think. One, has the person already fulfilled this command to be fruitful and multiply? Do they already have kids? And you have to decide for yourself how many kids like alleviates this like gift that God's given, right? Is it 1? Is it 4? Like, where's the line there? Is it gray? Is it even like you even understand it from the Bible? Do you have to ask the Holy Spirit and He tells you? Or
I would
is
say,
it a mandate that's...
I would say even before that, and maybe you were about to say it with the or part, but I would say even before you say when is this commandment fulfilled, the biggest question is this command binding on all humanity? Is that where you're going with your
I was literally
going
to say that. Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Perfect.
Is it still a mandate that applies to you today? Like, do we have enough people on the earth that we no longer need to be multiplying, right? We could be fruitful, but do we need to be multiplying still? Or do we need to be maintaining? So that's another question that you could ask yourself more philosophically. That's a good point, Ethan. So what do you think there, Ethan, on those 2 points? Because there's more, obviously, to this, like the actual changing the function of the human being. But I think starting with Scripture of that command to be fruitful and multiply is a good place to start.
Yeah, I don't think this is binding on all people everywhere or all Christians everywhere. Then 2 references are that Jesus didn't do that. So if you're going to say everyone who ever lives has to fulfill this, then Jesus didn't fulfill it, and that's a problem. And then if you want to go further and say, well, He's God, He gets an exception, then that's fine. I could see how that would be an okay view to have while holding this view. Exactly. Paul did not have a wife. At least when he was traveling, we have reference that he was single. He was a Pharisee, and usually Pharisees, I think, had spouses, so maybe his wife left him after he converted. Who knows? We don't have, that's just some speculation. We don't have any text on that. But Paul makes it pretty clear in 1 Corinthians that he is single. And he's like, I wish everyone would become like I am so we can do the work of God. So you can't say this is absolutely binding. Now, that doesn't mean that people shouldn't have kids. It just means that it's not sin to not have kids.
Sure. Good thing to point out. I would say that it's not contingent on all people to be fruitful and multiply anymore. One, because I think this is for the beginning people at the beginning of the world when the world was being initially populated. So it makes sense. Like, that's the perspective that the verse is coming from. And now I think everyone that looks at the earth could say the world is pretty populated now. I don't think we have like an overpopulation problem, but we got people pretty much everywhere at this point, right? There can always be room for more or less people, depending on how many kids people decide to have, but it's not like we're trying to populate into more places of the world because we don't have enough kids yet. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Unless you want to make an argument that like we have to populate onto other planets or under the sea or into the sky or something.
We don't
like
have
that.
to.
Yeah, like I don't think you can make a biblical argument for that.
We could never go to space and it's fine. We don't. The Bible doesn't care about that. You know, that's,
yeah.
It's hilarious.
So I don't think it'd be a good argument to make necessarily. So I think you could use either of those perspectives. One, it's like the Bible doesn't even say that it's for all of humanity for all time, or that it's already been accomplished. Okay. I think people, though, that would say you can't change this function of the human body would say that this verse is specifically talking about what humans are made to do as human beings. Like, we're made to be fruitful and multiply. What do you think about that? You think that that's kind of counteracted by the fact that there's a lot of like profound biblical characters that didn't do that?
Yeah, I don't think that that's the primary function of humanity. The primary function, and even if people were going to say like, oh yeah, see, like that was the command we're given, so we're supposed to do it all the time. It seems like in the New Testament specifically, there's a different focus for the people of God. It's not be fruitful and multiply, it's go make disciples. So in the New Covenant, the Christians are supposed to make disciples. And you could argue, like, oh yeah, a great way to make disciples is to have babies and raise Christians. I would also agree. I think Christians should probably have more kids because we see I would say Americans also should have more kids because we see the concerning birth rates and declining civilizations and all that stuff. And it looks like we're headed that way in America. So maybe Christians could step it up, and Americans in general would be nice. And I say that being married with no kids, so I'm a hypocrite. but, um, but I just don't think that you could take this verse and say, see, this is what we're created for. Because that's like, then I would say, okay, then man is supposed to name animals. Like, that's what Adam did. So if we're going to look at.
So many name animals.
Yeah, so do I have to go out and find new species and name them? No. So it's like, yeah, there are things that all Christians are told to do, and that is go make disciples.
Mm-hmm. I think just like the gift we're given in that we're made in the image of God, we are to be fruitful and multiply as a gift that is good. Everybody that wants to partake in the gift of being fruitful and multiplying can do that. That's like part of being a human, is to be able to be fruitful and multiply. So like you were saying, I think it's something we can partake in, but not like a mandate that we have to fulfill. Like every human being that's alive has to do this thing. I think I would agree with you, but that's the case. Getting a little deeper into the topic, though, do you think it's okay to change the function of the human body? This is where I start to have certain problems, because on first thought, I think it would be okay to get a vasectomy, like to change that function of the human body. But if I ask myself, would it be okay for me to just like change a different function of my body because I want to? Like, would it be all right for me to like not be able to see anymore, or like cut off a finger if I want to? I start to have more reservations about that, but I don't know why. Right? Mm-hmm. Do you see a difference there at all?
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot when it comes to vasectomies. It gets very muddled, right? Because there's a lot of questions to ask about it. Like in one regard, if it's just like, oh, I just don't want to have any more kids, then I watched in my research a number of people say like there's probably some caution to have there, because maybe right now you don't want to have more kids, but you don't know in 3 years if your heart's going to change. So you don't want to make, just out of wisdom's sake, you don't want to make a near irreversible decision. Second, also like, yeah, are you trying to play God? Are you like, I don't want to do this, and I don't know if I have enough money? Because it's like, well, if you just, it goes into the bigger conversation of all contraceptives across the board, but this is just a more extreme one because it's irreversible pretty much. I say pretty much because I know there are like, I think there are reversible surgeries, but I don't know how successful they are. But it's like, are you playing God and you decide when you are done having kids and you're not trusting God's plan? Although that expands more into other contraceptives idea. If it's purely just out of convenience, I don't think that's a wise decision. If it's like, oh, the doctor advised us if we have another kid, it could put the mother's life at risk, that seems like an acceptable reason. But if it's pure convenience, I have a lot of pause. But I don't know if anyone can say either which way, absolutely yes or no. You can't. I think it has to be between each couple and their community and pastor, their friends, their family. It's just something that's a pretty big deal that the Bible is not explicit on.
On the irreversible side of it, I know it's not irreversible, but it depends on how long you go. I looked up some statistics really quick. If you have your vasectomy reversed within 3 years, you have a 97% chance of like your body functioning correctly, and like a 75% chance of being able to still get somebody pregnant. Okay. Now, if you wait like 15 plus years, you have a 70% chance of your body functioning correctly and a like 40% chance of pregnancy. Now, I don't know if those numbers are correlated to age as well, because I know as you get older, those numbers go down as well. So I don't know where like all the science works out in that. But I mean, you're looking at numbers around 50 to 75% success rate. So for some people, maybe irreversible. For a lot of people, it is reversible. And then the actual pregnancy side of it has a lot of factors that go into it. I don't know if we could really show statistically what percentage you have of that being caused by the vasectomy or not. So that's for sure a gray area in my mind, it being irreversible. This is my, I guess, stance on the whole issue. I think there are many circumstances where you could get a vasectomy and it would be morally okay, right? So this goes for women too. I just forget what the procedure is called. For women, some of the issues could be like pregnancy issues. You could get some kind of like your tubes getting cut or whatever that is called. I'm so sorry, I don't know the actual term.
Oh my gosh.
It's the same for men. It's just
Is
getting your
it
tubes
tied?
cut.
Well,
Yeah,
like,
cut and
they
tied.
tie them so it, like seals it. You just-
Well, you cut them and you tie them. Yeah.
Okay. I see.
Yeah, that's why I call it tubular severance. Yeah.
That's just such an
Okay.
extreme term. I like tied way better.
Yeah, you cut them, and so to undo the surgery, you have to like actually put them back together, which is why it's can be hard sometimes. But anyways, for women, you could get this procedure done because you actually shouldn't have kids. Like it's medically like very dangerous for you to do that, and so that could be some reason why you get it. That could be morally like totally acceptable. I think if you have like a family planning kind of a thing, that could also be a reason why you could get it done. Like let's say you have 4 kids and you only make a certain amount of money, and if you get another kid, like it's gonna take away from the quality of life of your other kids in a significant way, not in like an insignificant way, right? Because there's nuances there. But 1 Timothy 5:8 like says you have to take care of your kids. Like if you neglect your family, it's bad. But if you neglect like your immediate family, like people that you've made, like that's a really bad thing to do. I forget the actual verse. Let me look it up real quick. Anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever, is what the actual verse says. And so if you are going to have just like the amount of kids you want to have, and that makes you be neglectful to them, one, because you either can't actually be a parent to that many kids, like let's say you have 15 kids, like there's zero way you're parenting 15 kids and working a full-time job. It's just not happening. Like you're not going to be a father to all of those children. Like I don't see a way you possibly could, just with the amount of time you had. Maybe if you didn't have a job.
Not as good of a father as possibly you could be.
Yeah. But I mean, let's just say you have 2 free hours a day, right? Like, what are you giving each kid 10 minutes every day?
Yeah, line them
Like,
up.
how is that
one
working?
after another? Get a
Like, there's
Google
no way,
Doc
like,
on
you
each
can-
kid and take notes.
I passed the ball 10 times with Timmy today, and then 10 times with Laura, and then 10 times with Ethan. Like, it's just going to be really hard to do that, right? And so it's going to be really hard for you to be a good parent. Beyond that, it's going to be really hard in today's society to be able to provide economically for that many kids. So there's considerations there as well. I'm not saying it's impossible to do. I'm just saying it's a consideration. And so it could be a morally permissible reason why you could have that procedure done. And
Well,
change
one
the
question
function of your body.
to push back on that, one question is like, if your reason is purely a financial situation, would that indicate that you possibly aren't trusting God to provide in the future? Like if God decided like, and that gets into more of the bigger theory, like does God choose when you have kids, or does he allow the individual couple to decide when they want to have kids and how they want to do that? Has he given responsibility to mankind, or does he intervene there? So it gets bigger into that topic, but it's like, is it possible that those people could just be living in fear and not trusting God? Or is it wisdom? Or is it nuanced?
Somebody could be living in fear for sure, but it's blatantly obvious that life comes from God, but life is created, like when that life comes into the world, is created by human beings. Like someone doesn't magically get pregnant unless like they have an immaculate conception, which has happened once, right? So no
well,
one's
if
just
you're
getting
Catholic,
naturally
it happened
pregnant.
twice.
Okay.
Mary's mom and Jesus.
Thanks
Which
for the
is like,
clarification.
just about that real quick. If it's like, oh, in order for Mary to be perfect, she had to have immaculate conception. Wouldn't that mean the same thing for her mom? Like, does it just keep going back, immaculate conception? Just putting it out there for Catholics to answer. We don't have to talk about it. Just putting it out there.
Okay. All right. I don't even know what I was talking about anymore. What was
We're
I
talking about
saying?
the financial situation. Is it wisdom or fear to choose around like how many kids or when to
Yeah.
stop having kids based on your financial situation.
Yeah. Kids are made by people having sex. Like that's just how God made it. So God is the one that institutes the life, that breathes the life into people. Good. I'm glad you know that now, Ethan. You let Laura know. But like God's the one, obviously, that breathes the soul into the individual. But the human is the one who decides when that happens, because we're the ones who decide when we have sex and not, right? Most of the time. And
You are
so
not Calvinist or Reformed.
yeah, I'm just operating on what I see in the world. Like I pretty much get to decide when that happens in my life. Now, of course, there could be medical instances that are different, and we can argue back and forth. But that's just what I plainly see. And so, someone could have fear and be acting out of fear. But again, not assuming bad motivations. I don't think that family planning is naturally motivated by fear. So I wouldn't say it's naturally a sinful thing to do. If you already have like 4 kids and you're like, hey, I'm satisfied with that. I'm not getting a better job. I like the job I have. This is how much time I have to spend with my kids every day. This is how much money I have. And so I either can't send another one to school if I have another one, or I don't have enough time to spend with the other one because they're born so close together or something. Or my wife just doesn't want to because she can't handle it, like staying home with that many kids or something like that. I don't know. There's a lot of factors that go into it. I would say that's a non-sinful reason why you could make that functional body change.
Yeah. And again,
for
it has to
examples.
do with the heart, right? Like if your heart is confident, like, yeah, look, we've evaluated this. This is what our life's looking like. I have a good amount of time to invest in my community and family and work. We don't want to be spread too thin. Then I think it's fine. But if your attitude is like scared, like, oh my gosh, I don't know if we can handle that. I'm worried. Then I'd say, yeah, don't live in that fear. Get to a place through prayer and seeking the Lord to get out of that fear. And then you can make the decision in confidence. Yeah, anything comes from fear doesn't come from faith. I think that's a Bible verse. And so you just want to make sure that if you don't have fear regardless of your decision, but the decision is not sinful itself inherently.
Yeah. Why I say I'm only 85% sure of like what I think on this is because of if somebody had zero reason for why they wanted a vasectomy, they were just like, I just want one, right? They don't have financial reasons. They don't have any kids already. They don't have like medical reasons. They just simply want to change their body's function for some reason. That's when I have some amount of like, okay, well that is a gray area. Like you're changing your body's function and it's fine in some instances, but you have no reason for why you want to change it. Like, let's say I just wanted to get one tomorrow because I know I never want to have kids, right? I want to ensure that by changing part of my body's function. I think you would be allowed to never have kids. Like, that's fine biblically, like we talked about already. But to change the function of your body to make it so that could never be the case, for some reason, I have some kind of problem with that because I wouldn't do that for any other part of my body. Like if I was just like, I don't want to see anymore, or I don't want to talk anymore, or I don't want to like have my fingers anymore. Like as a Christian, we would say it's bad to mutilate your body. And so you shouldn't do those things. And so does that still fall under that category of mutilating yourself? I don't know. It seems like kind of a gray area, but I would kind of lean against it. At the moment, I kind of think you have to have some kind of reason for wanting a vasectomy. Yeah, that's kind of where I lean toward, just because it's such a big thing to change your body's function. You need some kind of important reason in my mind.
Yeah, and I definitely don't think it's right to say I just want to get it done is not a good enough reason in my mind to go through with it. One, for the guys, especially if you're single, like you might not want to right now, but one, your desires might change. And two, if you're single, you're going to get married one day, maybe. And like if you don't plan on getting married, it doesn't matter. So you don't need to go through with it. But if you plan on getting married and you're single, you should not do it until you're married because your spouse might want kids, right? Like the Bible talks about how in 1 Corinthians 7, it says like, the husband's not his own. He belongs to his wife, and the wife's not her own. She belongs to her husband. So I don't have rights over my body just because I want to, as far in that realm, right? Like I am accountable to my wife. And so if you're single and if you're single and you don't plan to get married, you don't need to worry about the subject. If you're single and you plan to get married, but you're thinking about getting a vasectomy, it's like, well, no, because you're going to have a wife one day and you're going to be accountable to her and you have to consider her desires. Yeah. It's not about you. And so I just want to is not a good reason because it comes off as just like selfish and presumptuous of like, oh, I don't want to now, and I know forever I won't want to. When it's like, you don't know
Yeah.
what's going to change in your life that's going to make you want to have kids in the future.
Yeah, very true. And it just feels like a fallacy. Like I wouldn't allow that for any other function of the body. I wouldn't think it's normal. I guess I wouldn't say I wouldn't allow. I wouldn't say it's normal for us to do that to any other part of the body. Would you say it's sinful or just bad? Like, is it actually a sin for someone to get a vasectomy if they have no reason, or is it just not an advisable thing? What do you think?
I think if you just want to, like I'm going to go through it because I don't want kids right now, it can be presumptuous and probably often is if it comes from I just don't want to. And we know from, I think one of the kings, I think it's, or maybe it's 1 Samuel. We know from, I think, 1 Samuel that presumption is sin. So it could be, you could make a case that it's sinful if your attitude is I just don't want to. Or I just don't want to have kids, or I just want to have the surgery.
Yeah. How much, I don't really think that you can relate the 1 Corinthians 6 verse, the body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. Like it's not your own, for you're bought with a price, for the glory of God is in your body. I don't think that can be applied here necessarily, but that's a verse that most people will try to apply. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know about that because your body's a temple doesn't mean it's not about your physical parts, your physical members. Now your physical members serve you, like your legs help you get around to spread the gospel, and your mouth helps you communicate the gospel, but people in wheelchairs and people who are mute still preach the gospel in ways they can. I just think there's probably better reasons not to do it. Like I said, like you don't want to play God. It's not someone who just says, well, I just want to do it, so I'm going to do it. It sounds more like, well, you just want to be in charge, and we're not in charge of our own bodies.
Sure. Yeah. I know the reason a lot of Christians think mutilating the body is sinful is because most of the time mutilation of your own body in Scripture is usually associated with pagan worship or demonic possession. And so when someone is demonically possessed in the Bible, it says they were cutting themselves, throwing themselves into the fire. They have no respect for their body, basically. And then priests, like we talked about earlier in the episode, would mutilate their bodies in worship or in ritual towards some kind of god or deity. And so that is why usually mutilation is considered bad in the Bible. And I would consider changing the function of your body as mutilation most of the time, unless you have a reason for it, like a medical or a moral reason for it, like taking care of your family or you're going to be harmed or something like that. It is a little bit of gray area, so I do kind of have a hard time saying that that is sin, just because it is kind of hard to argue. I think someone could say it. I wouldn't have a giant problem with it, but it is a little hard for me to say that, which is why I was saying I'm at like 85%, because I'm just not 100% sure.
Yeah. That's fair. All right, do we want to move on?
Part of it, though.
Yeah, you want to move on to the other ones? We are
we can.
we're just over an hour, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've done a whole episode on like the DNA modification before and prosthetics. That could be a whole episode in its own, again, if we wanted to. But I'm fine with stopping here if you want.
I mean, yeah, we've been going for an hour now. I mean, well, I'll just say something quickly about prosthetics. My opinion is, if it's medically necessary, it's fine. If you just want a robot hand in the future, I don't think that's a good enough reason. Like Star Wars,
Dude, you're a killjoy.
You also can't use the Force with a robot hand. Although apparently you can, because Darth Vader does. And he's one of the most powerful Sith Lords. Anyways, I'm not talking about Star Wars. I just don't think it's a good reason to say, I want a robot hand that could be having stronger grip strength. It's just like, I don't know, your hand is more advanced than a robot. Pretty cool. It's also with the hand
What if
God
you wanted to
gave
add
you.
something to your body? Like what if I could put a chip in my brain that made me have telekinesis? I'm not taking away anything. I'm adding something.
I don't know. That might be trying to improve upon in a different bad ethical way on what God has done.
Why is it bad ethically?
What?
Why is it bad ethically?
Because it's just not natural to humanity, and you're trying to give
just
yourself...
say you don't like fun. You don't like fun, Ethan.
It's like,
No fun, Peterson.
But I would even say like if you could install like wings and fly, I'd be like you probably shouldn't. I know it's not as like I know flying is fun, but it's like we were created with intent to have the limitations we have, and I think that's okay.
But I think that's a bad argument because we have machines we get in and fly right now. What's the difference between getting in a machine and flying and having a machine on you and flying?
One is on you. One affects your being. You can choose not to.
They both affect your being. What is the difference between it being on you and you being in it?
The same. It's just like how the plastic surgery does a permanent change. If you install wings onto your back, you are permanently changing the human design that God created. Getting in a plane is not changing the human design.
It's changing your limitations, and you can take the wings
off. No. I think it's
not like I'm cutting an arm off. I'm not cutting an arm off. I still have my arms. I'm just adding wings, and I could unadd the wings later.
Why can't you just wear a suit that has the wings and you don't have to change your body?
I could do that.
See, I'd be fine with that. I'm fine with wearing a suit that has wings. I just don't like the putting something on me that changes what it means to be human.
But you're just arbitrarily saying that it changes what it means to be human without giving like a definition.
I think the difference is that one is attached and one is not.
I know. That is the difference. But why is that ethically wrong?
I don't know. It just is. So it is wrong.
Good argument. Because I said so. Go to your room.
Shut up.
Don't talk back to me.
I'll mute you. You'll lose your privileges.
All right, that's been the Things You Don't Hear Church podcast, guys. That's so funny.
Yeah, and then DNA modification. That's a really tricky one. I know I said we're going to wrap up on, but that's a bigger one because it seems like it would be morally okay to change DNA in a way that like benefits people. Like, oh, this person's going to be allergic to peanuts. And you're like, well, you can get rid of that, make them not allergic. Or this person's going to be in a wheelchair their whole life. You can like make them walk. It's like, that's good. But it also still feels like playing God, so it makes me uncomfortable. So I don't know how to think about that one right now.
Right. There has been some successful DNA modifications. We can test for a lot of things now before someone's born, but actually changing someone's DNA, like when they're in the womb, it has been done. The person that did it was a Chinese guy. In 2018, he was jailed like immediately for doing it, but he successfully, what did he do? He changed the DNA in someone so that they, in an embryo, so that they would be HIV resistant, and so they couldn't get HIV. That seems like a good thing, but it's so dangerous at the same time. It's like, whoa, like if I allow for that, what else could I possibly be allowing for? Like there's a whole like eugenics argument there that could be crazy.
Right, and the whole thing goes like, and more about like the philosophical side of things about allowing more than just like, not so much like is this good for the embryo or the baby, is so much more like governmental control. If you allow this to happen, then what's stopping the government from then mandating every doctor to make people more obedient and less? Yeah. And if there's a gene that like causes people to rebel, like bringing that out, making them just catatonic.
Everybody.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, for checks and balances, because people with power abuse it all the time, maybe we should just stay away from that completely.
Which is why I think even in China, the guy went to jail. Like, it's not something anyone's comfortable with yet.
Yeah, it's like we've had people with disabilities and birth defects for as long as we've lived on Earth, and Christians have always been the ones to go out intentionally seek and care for and love those people. Like they used to, back in ancient Rome, they would like, if there was a baby born with a birth defect, they would just basically leave it on the street. And the Christians would come along and pick the baby up and raise the babies and like care for the babies, right? So it's not so as Christians, it's kind of like maybe we shouldn't run from that. And the baby, but I don't. It's so hard to think about. But Christians historically
not actually hard for me
always
to think
been the
about,
ones
but
to
it is scary.
Mm-hmm.
It is scary. We've done a whole episode on that. So I think we can kind of leave it there. If you want to listen to that episode, you can go find it. I have no idea what number it is.
We might want to redo it because that was probably like 3 or 4 years ago.
I think it was only like 2, and I still have the same. Like I think I still have the same ideas. I'm pretty sure. I remember what we said, and I think I still have the same.
That was with
assumptions.
Spencer, right?
No.
Oh, that was
The one
us.
with Spencer was about AI
Okay.
and AGI. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
All right.
singularity.
Well, everyone, thanks for listening. Let us know what you think about this topic in the comments. Is it okay for Christians to get body modifications? And where's the line? And what can they or can they not get? Come back for more episodes where we handle the things you don't hear in church and the gray areas of the Christian faith. See ya.
Adios.